What if Tatsumaki was Deku's mother? Chapter 9. Far across the country, Tornado's office exploded with green energy and he flew out through the roof. Who took him? Tornado growled. Tornado used her extreme power to hold Aizawa in the air by his throat. Answer me, and don't even think about using your quirk unless you want to fall 500 feet to a very messy death. Growled Tornado again. Aizawa gulped. He wasn't scared of much, but when Nezu told him to inform Tornado of Deku's kidnapping, he was filled with a soul-crushing fear. Tornado had put people in comas for much less. "Where is my son?" screamed Tornado. It was the League of Villains. One of the students mentioned seeing a woman with green hair and psychic powers like yours, said Aizawa. Tornado's stomach fell, but she needed to be sure. Which student? Said Tornado. Meanwhile, Class 1A was gathered in the hospital. Many of them had been injured by the gas villain's attack. Ashto wasn't physically hurt, but she was shaken to her core. I couldn't stop her. She slapped me away like I was nothing, said Ashto. It's not your fault. If she was strong enough to take down Deku, then there's only a few people who would have a chance against her, said Bakugo. Bakugo gulped, knowing that one of them was probably out for blood. As if on cue, the wall of the hospital was torn off and Tornado and Aizawa stepped in. Tornado's usual cold but cocky expression had been replaced by a soul-crushing glare and an aura of barely contained infernal rage. Her usual green aura had darkened to near pitch black and felt like it would kill anyone in the room if they said anything. Which one? Said Tornado. Aizawa, sweating with fear, pointed at Ashto. Her, said Aizawa. In a flash, Tornado appeared in front of the pink hero, floating above her. Even though Tornado was slightly shorter than Ashto, she couldn't help but be intimidated. I'm sorry, ma'am. I should have tried harder to help him, said Ashto. Tornado's eye twitched with rage. The woman who took him. Was this her? Said Tornado. Tornado pulled out her phone and shoved an old picture of Psychos in Ashto's face. Instantly the young girl began nodding. Tornado's rage boiled. Thank you, young lady, said Tornado. At that moment, Bakugo nervously walked over. He was the only one who dared to even breathe. Tornado? Asked Bakugo. Tornado spun around to face Bakugo. I'm sure Deku was okay. He's the strongest one out of our class, said Bakugo. Tornado had always respected and liked Bakugo. He was strong and made a good friend and rival for Deku. Thank you, Bakugo. Now if you excuse me, said Tornado. Tornado shot off, tearing through the sound barrier, and at such terrifying speed. Everyone in the room finally took a breath, feeling that their lives were safe. Tornado flew through the air at maximum speed, feeling the rage building in her heart. I swear, Psychos, I'm going to tear you apart with my own hands, said Tornado. Tornado closed her eyes, but after a few moments they snapped open, and she became even more angry. Why can't I sense them? With powers as great as Izuku's and Psychos, so close to each other I should be able to feel them from the other side of the world. Unless... Tornado shook her head. She had to believe he was alive. Stay strong, baby. I'm on my way, said Tornado. Far away, Deku woke up. He was surrounded by darkness, and his hands and feet were tied to a chair. Good morning, said Psychos. Deku looked up, seeing the tall green-haired woman walking towards him. Where her arm had been was now bandaged. Deku winced in pain, glancing down, seeing the bandages wrapped around his arm and shoulder. Where am I? Asked Deku. Far away from your silly little class, said Psychos. You messed up by not killing me. My mum's going to track my energy, and when she does, you'll die, said Deku. Deku tried to power up, but something was wrong. Deku looked at Psychos, but she wasn't suppressing his power. What did you do to me? Asked Deku. Psychos pressed a button on the wall, turning on the light, and Deku realized he was sat inside a metal dome. I've always wanted to get back at Tatsumaki, but I knew I never could beat her in combat. Even with quirk enhancers, she would tear me apart, so I began to experiment. After years, I managed to figure out that certain electromagnetic frequencies can interfere with Esper's powers, and that is when I met the boss. Can you hear the dog? I'm sorry, that's my neighbour. He offered me a chance to finally use my power and creations. It's a very interesting device. Where the suppression skill lets out a little bit of the user's power, this device doesn't. We are completely undetectable, said Psychos. All this over a broken heart, said Deku. Psychos backhanded Deku across the face and sat back down. A child wouldn't understand. Any love you feel for your partners is just the stupid hormones clouding your mind. You don't know what real love is. How vulnerable and safe you feel. She took that from me. She crushed it, all because of All Might, said Psychos. I don't blame her. You're crazy, said Deku, laughing. Psychos punched Deku in the shoulder right where he'd been impaled earlier. Deku groaned in pain, but didn't let the cocky grin on his face vanish. This is seriously sad. Oh, boo-hoo, you got dumped. Get over it. It's not a reason to dedicate your life to killing people, said Deku. You don't understand. You're just a brat. What do you know about love? Said Psychos. Not much, but I do know it hurts. That feeling of the hole in your stomach when you can't be sure how the other person feels, or if they think about you as much as you think about them. When you look into their eyes, and you feel your heart beat faster, and you wonder if theirs is the same. Or when you tell them how you feel, but you're scared about messing it up. I know that feeling and it's awful, but I wouldn't give it up for anything. And I wouldn't try to kill people if it didn't work out, said Deku. Deku's mind flashed with images of Ashido, but then he was dragged back to reality by another slap across the face. You're just a spoilt brat. I should have killed you in those woods, said Psychos. It doesn't matter now. Either way you will die. Do you think just because she can't sense me you're safe? If so, you really never knew her. She will turn this country upside down looking for me. Tell me, Psychos, is there anyone you've ever cared about? Family? Friends? Asked Deku. Psychos didn't reply. Each and every one of them will be found. They will give you up, and I doubt she'll ever have to lay a finger on them. I don't care what happens to me. I just want to remind you who you're fucking with. Are you ready to die? Asked Deku. Deep inside Psychos, a little ember of fear sparked to life. She had forgotten what it felt like to face Tornado. Far away, Tornado, All Might and Endeavour and several other top heroes stood in the police headquarters listening to the briefing. Tornado's eye was twitching with rage, but All Might brought his massive hand down onto her shoulder, bringing her back to reality. We will get him back, I promise, as his father, said All Might. Endeavour scoffed on the other side of the room. He was always suspected that All Might was Deku's father. Just tell me where they are and stay out my way. Don't you dare stop me when you hear screaming, said Tornado. The police officers in the room gulped at All Might's side. You should have trained your brat properly. If he wasn't so weak, we wouldn't be in this situation, said Endeavour. In a manic rage, Tornado shot across the room towards Endeavour, bloodlust dripping off her. Luckily, All Might grabbed her ankle, pulling her into a bear hug. Tornado's tiny body was covered by All Might's massive arms, but her little hands were still swinging and pounding on his chest. Yeah, that's right. Hold back, your bitch, said Endeavour. Everyone in the room froze. Endeavour's disdain for Tornado had always been obvious, but it had only gotten worse recently. All Might sighed, looking over at Endeavour in disappointment. He's all yours, said All Might. All Might dropped his arms, unleashing a demonic Tatsumaki. Everyone in the room scattered as Endeavour was slammed into the wall by Tatsumaki. Slowly, the Emerald Esper floated over him. You do not get to critique my parenting methods, said Tornado. Tornado looked around, seeing that it was just her, Endeavour and All Might in the room. Or should I bring up the fact that you beat your wife until she scarred your son and she ended up in hospital?" said Tornado. Tornado's tone was venomous, but was nothing compared to the explosion of cold rage within her. Endeavour stared up in shock. "How did you?" asked Endeavour. "Your son, thankfully, didn't inherit your personality, and I managed to make actual friends." "Friends like my dear Izuku," said Tornado. Endeavour's heart was in his throat. He knew that he'd be doomed if any of this got out. "Don't ever talk about my kid like that ever again, otherwise I will kill you," said Tornado. Endeavour was dropped on the floor, and Tornado walked out the door, stopping just before leaving. "Also remember, if my son is weak, what does that make yours when Izuku beat him in the sports festival?" said Tornado. Tornado walked out, slamming the door off its hinges before Endeavour could even respond. "She's definitely gotten better at controlling her rage, but I don't know how much longer she'll be able to keep this up," thought All Might. All Might walked after Tornado, pulling her into another hug. The green-haired hero squeezed All Might with all her strength, which luckily wasn't much, and began to cry into his chest. "I can't lose him. He's all I've got," said Tornado. Tornado's tears poured out of her face, soaking All Might's hero suit. "It's okay. I've got you," said All Might. All Might squeezed Tornado a little, feeling his own tears fall down his face. "We will get him back," said All Might. Far away, Ashito clenched her fist. Next to her stood Bakugo, Ida, Yaoyorozu and Todoroki. "Don't worry, Deku. We're coming for you," said Ashito. Thanks to the tracker that Yaoyorozu had put on the Nomu, they knew where the League was hiding, and they hoped Deku was there. An hour later, the heroes were in positions at both locations. Tornado stared at the building in front of her, desperately trying to hold on to her vanishing sanity. Deku could be dying in there, and she's not doing anything. "Calm. We need to wait. We can't go in until everyone's ready," Tornado repeated to herself. Inside the building, Deku was still sat in the dome with Psychos. He was significantly more beaten and was currently unconscious. Suddenly the door of the dome opened and Shigaraki walked in. "How is our guest?" asked Shigaraki. "The brat is having a little nap," said Psychos. "Good. Get ready, it's time," said Shigaraki. Shigaraki handed Psychos a knife, then left. Psychos looked down at the knife and took a deep breath. She walked over to the door and pushed it open, then turned off the electromagnetic suppression in the room. Instantly she powered up to the maximum. Outside the building, Tatsumaki's mind went black. All restraint and reason disappeared. She knew that power and could feel the bloodlust that came with it. In a fraction of a second, she shot through the building, landing in front of the door of Deku's cell. Her eyes went wide with shock and rage as she saw was her boy beaten and bloody in front of her. At max speed she shot forward, solely focused on saving Deku, until she heard the door shut behind her. Slowly Deku turned around to see Psycho standing there, knife in hand. Without taking her eyes off Tornado, Psycho reached behind her, flicking the switch to reactivate the containment field. Tatsumaki's feet landed on the ground just as Psycho rushed forward, stabbing Tornado in the gut. "I knew it would be fun to kill your brat, but then I thought, why not kill you both? I've been working on this device for years, for the sole purpose of killing you, and I've got to say now, this is when it's finally here, I'm disappointed," said Psychos. Tatsumaki fell to one knee, blood pouring out. "Look how you've fallen. The mighty, terrible Tornado reduced to a sad, bleeding wreck. Go on, beg for your life," said Psychos. "I'm not done yet," said Tornado. Tornado kicked Psycho's legs out from underneath her, then tackled her to the ground. The villain slashed at her again, cutting into Tatsumaki's arm, but she didn't give up. She was used to the pain and was ready to deal with some of her own. With a firm headbutt, the green-haired hero smashed Psycho's nose, then pinned down her only good arm with a foot on her wrist. The villain groaned in pain as blood covered her face. "You went after my family. My son," growled Tornado. Tornado slapped Psychos across the face. I should kill you. I should tear you apart. But if I do that, I'm no better than you, said Tornado. Tornado punched Psychos in the head, knocking her out, and stood up, moving over to Deku. The wound in her gut was gushing out blood, and her vision was blurring, but she didn't care. She needed to save him. Tatsumaki undid his bindings, then ran her blood-covered hand across his cheek. Izuku, honey, it's time to wake up, said Tornado. A small smile began to form on Deku's face as he felt the familiar warmth of his mother's hand. Slowly he opened his eyes, just in time to see a blade swinging towards his mother's neck. Deku's hand shot forward, but he was too slow. The blade passed in front of his fingers and was going to kill Tornado. No, I can't lose her, Deku screamed internally. Deep inside Deku, something roared to life. A power that hadn't been activated since the USJ. A small flicker, an ember of something greater, grew roaring with energy. A supernova of power. His mother's powerful telekinesis and his father's one for all smashed into each other, fusing and growing. Like a small spark on a sea of petrol, Deku's power exploded. Die, growled Psychos. Psychos swung the blade with all her force, but it didn't hit Tatsumaki. The blade bent and melted in the villain's hand. In shock, Psychos looked up to see Deku pupilless, eyes glowing and sparking with energy. That's not possible. The device, it should be nullifying your powers, said Psychos. Tatsumaki looked up, seeing the immense energy radiating off Deku, and put her hand against his face. You underestimated him. As did I, said Tatsumaki. With a flick of his hand, Deku forced Psychos into the metal wall so hard it bent. The sound of crushed bone and tearing flesh was deafening. With another flick of his hand, Deku turned off the machine, feeling his power increase even more. He loved this feeling and never wanted to stop. Deku stepped forward, the cowering figure of Psychos in front of him. Her single arm was horribly broken and twisted, same for her legs, and her jaw was hanging off. I said you should prepare for death, said Deku. The light from Deku's eyes was blinding, as if two miniature suns were shining down on Psychos. Tornado could see that something was very wrong. Acting quickly, she wrapped Deku in her energy, holding him still, but it wasn't enough. The sheer strength of his power threw her back, her body hitting the wall. She groaned in pain, her injury finally stopping her. Please, Izuku, she's not a threat anymore, said Tatsumaki. Slowly, Deku's mind returned. He'd been consumed by rage and bloodlust, and his newfound strength had made that 100 times more powerful. However, hearing his mother's desperate and pained cry brought him back. A few moments of silence passed as Deku's power faded. The moment the light left his body, he collapsed next to Tornado, who quickly wrapped him in her arms. A few minutes earlier, All Might was stood atop a rooftop when he saw the Tornado shoot through the building. What is she doing? Asked All Might. All Might grabbed a radio and immediately ordered the attack. Moments later, All Might and the rest of the heroes smashed through the wall to face the villains. We are here, yelled All Might. Quick as a flash, Granduno shot in, knocking out both Kurogiri and Darby. Yes, you are, All Might, just as planned. Now, Master, screamed Shigaraki. Suddenly, silver liquid filled the room and dozens of Nomu jumped out. However, they weren't all weakling grey Nomu. No, Shigaraki and All For One had planned ahead and made sure that they had several black Nomu ready. The massive beasts jumped out of the teleporting slime, launching straight towards All Might. Unfortunately for Shigaraki, he was unable to make a new version of the Nomu from the USJ, so they were being torn apart. Before it could get any worse, All For One teleported them all over to the Nomu warehouse, including Deku. The unconscious hero laid on the ground, unaware that his life now hung in the balance. Meanwhile, Izuku! Where did my baby go? Screamed Tornado. A small laugh came from the other side of the room. Using what little strength she had, Psychos held her jaw together so she could speak. He's dead. He's with the boss now. He's dead, said Psychos. Psychos laughed, but Tatsumaki was done. Using her incredible power, she closed the wound in her stomach and forced her body back together. It stopped the bleeding, but it definitely wasn't healing. It required immense focus and hurt like hell, but it needed to be done. Tatsumaki floated to her feet, her green aura thick with rage. You could have been so much more, said Tatsumaki. I hope you get to see the twisted, mangled remains of your son before... Psychos didn't finish her sentence. Tatsumaki stood, her face cold and uncaring, looking down at the broken body of Psychos, the villain's neck broken. Quickly, Tatsumaki ran out the room to see All Might smashing Onomu through the floor. With a flick of her wrist, all of Onomu seemingly evaporated into a puff of red mist that covered the room. All for one Hazuzuku, said Tatsumaki. And we have just lost contact with the warehouse team, said All Might. Before anyone could react, the two vanished from view. They shot through the sky at maximum speed. Is that your blood? Asked All Might. Don't worry about it. Just let's save Izuku, said Tatsumaki. End of chapter 9.